Housing Advisory Committee is called to order. Can we get a roll call?
Okay. Our chick, Jamie Bell is absent, Mary Lou Hildreth is absent, Michael Rayburn,
Yes, I'm here.
Cynthia Chestnut's absent, William Smith is absent at this time, Sayed Khan.
Yes, sir.
Octavia Washington,
Here.
Amy Cepeda,
I'm here.
Jennifer Rivers, Fred Silfarth, and Jackie Davis are not here. And Raina Soccer, the alternate commissioner member, is not here also.
Okay, thank you, John. For the adoption of the agenda, we don't have a quorum, so we can't actually vote on anything. So can we just agree, does anyone dispute the agenda as laid out on page 2 of your packet? Hearing no disputations, we will consider the agenda adopted, even though we can't vote on it. Likewise, we can't approve the minutes from the previous meeting because we don't have a quorum, so we'll table that until our next meeting. So let's just jump right into our E.1 exclusionary zone information item.
Okay, thanks. I just want to take a minute to talk about what we want to accomplish and what we want to accomplish tonight and why. And then Juan Castillo from the Department of Sustainable Development, a planner with the...
Hey, Juan.
Hey, right. We'll talk about inclusionary zoning. So it's important to know that at a recent General Policy Committee meeting, for several reasons, but primarily at the urging of Commissioner Chestnut, the City Commission requested the following two things. One is that AHAC be involved in the development and the review of city inclusionary zoning policies and or regulations. And two, that AHAC take the lead in developing and implementing community engagement around inclusionary zoning. So the first part of this meeting will be kind of an informational and will be a discussion of inclusionary zoning, and Juan will have lots of answers and good information about that. While the second part of the meeting will be a discussion of how AHAC wants to engage the community around inclusionary zoning. For example, do you want to have meetings? If you do, how many? Where do you want to have them? I mean, we talked about some of this stuff a little before, but not specifically about inclusionary zoning. How do you want to conduct publicity and outreach? When do you want to have them? Do you want to do other types of engagement besides meetings? We'll go over some of that after we get some more information about the main topic, which is inclusionary zoning. So this is Juan Castillo. He's a planner with our Department of Sustainable Development.
Hi, everyone. And of course, Special Advisor Andrew Person.
Interim Special Advisor.
As John mentioned, today we are here to give you information on the current proposal for inclusionary zoning. I'll explain what all that means, but very informal presentation. If there are questions, please feel free to ask them. But again, we're just going to go ahead and give you some information, have some discussion. We want to hear from you. This is still in the process of being developed, worked, and so we definitely want to hear your input. And then we'll go from there. So, as I mentioned, as John mentioned, my name is Juan Castillo. I'm a planner here with the Department of Sustainable Development. And what we are bringing before you today is a proposal for inclusionary housing. But before that, I just want to step back and just kind of give you the context of what's happening, right? I think we're pretty familiar with the fact that Gainesville is struggling to provide affordable housing. It's expensive to live in Gainesville. And more each day, people are finding it even more difficult to find places to live, whether they're trying to purchase a house or whether they're trying to rent an apartment. And you've probably heard some of our initiatives to try to deal with creating a situation where it's more affordable to buy a house, but this right here is targeting more the potential for someone to rent a place to live. And so with everything happening, again, rent is expensive. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a nurse at Shands, and he was giving me the rundown as to his endeavor with finding a two-bedroom apartment. He was telling me that he consistently kept coming up with something around the figures of $1,500 for a two-bedroom apartment, which I found to be insane. But he's a nurse, and he actually makes really good money, and for him it was a pretty steep price, and that's not unheard of here in Gainesville, right? So it doesn't make matters any easier that most of the new developments that are coming online, new multifamily developments, are primarily catering to students. So not only are rents really expensive for normal people to be able to afford, but then there are not that many options for people to have the ability to say, hey, I want to try out, I don't know, a condo or something along those lines, to see if that's more affordable for them. So that's kind of the context of where this is fitting in, right? Now, it's estimated that if you make anything less than $35,000 a year, you are considered to be house or housing cost burden, right? So it's really difficult for you to be able to afford a place to live. The formula, the sweet formula, if you will, that they suggest is that 30% of your income should go towards housing. So if more than that goes towards housing, if you have to spend 40%, 50% of your income to be able to afford to live, then that your house, your income house burden. In Gainesville, the median income is somewhere around $37,000 or so. And so with that context, I kind of want to paint you a picture. So let's say, and these figures are based on rent.com, so take them as you will, but according to rent.com, a 3-bedroom apartment here in Gainesville goes for something along the lines of $1,600 a month. So with that 30% in mind, if this were to be affordable for someone, they would have to make something like $53 or $5,300 a month, which is roughly $63,000 a year. Not taking into consideration benefits and all that stuff. This is rough numbers, but you can kind of get the picture that a 3-bedroom apartment is not really affordable for someone that makes something on the lines of $37,000 a year. But then again, a single person probably won't need a 3-bedroom apartment. So let's say a 1-bedroom apartment, right? You have, according to rent.com, a 1-bedroom apartment runs around $1,100 a month here in Gainesville, which is crazy, absolutely crazy. But besides the point, so $1,100 a month, you're looking at, for this to be affordable, someone will have to be able to make $3,600 or $3,600 a month, which comes to about $44,000 a year, roughly. Again, the median income here in Gainesville is around $36,000 a year. You can see the picture. And so the idea, and this just kind of to hammer the point that a lot of what's happening right now is catering to students. So really, it's just the market is students can afford to pay these kinds of prices for several factors, right? Whether it be they have a loan, they have parents that can help them subside, they have whatever it may be, the student population can afford these type of prices. And so, in order to deal with this situation, we are proposing inclusionary zoning. So, kind of to take a step back, inclusionary zoning, all it is a regulatory tool that requires new development, multifamily development, to provide affordable housing. So if a new development comes online, this regulatory tool says you must provide this amount of affordable housing. And there are different versions of it. A lot of municipalities make them either voluntary or mandatory. The way, if a developer provides an X amount of affordable housing, there's a certain amount of set off or a certain percentage of bonus that's included for that affordable housing that they're providing, those numbers kind of vary depending on the jurisdiction. But for the most part, the way this works is that development must provide an affordable housing at what's considered market rate. So, a unit that looks exactly like the ones that you would purchase at the same price, right? Say a one-bedroom apartment, an $1,100 unit, the affordable apartment has to look just like the $1,100 unit. And so the affordable unit, even though it looks just like the market rate, would be offered to someone that qualifies for a much cheaper price, if you will. And that's a price that someone will qualify for. In our particular case, we're looking at someone that makes an 80% AMI or 80% of the average median income, so 80% of $37,000 a year, which is something along the lines of like 28,000, 29,000, just to give you a rough number here. But if someone qualifies for that, for the affordable housing unit, they would be connected with the unit that's available at that much deeper discounted rate. So they would, in essence, be able to, in theory, afford to live in this affordable housing unit. And the way that would be handled, an independent organization would step in, and they would be in charge of looking at this development and saying, hey, you have 5 affordable units that are designated as affordable units. Then you have 5 people over here that qualify. We're going to connect those two and make sure that A, they qualify, and that B, that they're meeting all the requirements associated with the conditions for the provision. Any questions so far?
The question is, you talk about affordable units and a regularly market price. So what's the market price right now, for example, is $1,600?
Depends on the, but like for example, according to rent.com,
Yeah.
for a 3-bedroom apartment, you're looking at $1,600.
$1,600.
That's not the
So if-
affordable unit, that's the market.
And I think,
No, no.
I think that's really
And
low.
I was gonna
Is it?
say,
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
really.
That's
that
exactly what I'm asking. If all the units are going for $1,600, how much would the affordable unit be going for?
So they would take, what is it, like 8%, right? So they would make it to where someone that can, let me see, I have to do math really quickly, but if you're looking at 80% of that rate, for example,
Probably, or what, a 20% discount? on the
yeah,
apartment?
20% discount, right? Just trying,
I've got
say
the-
something more calculate.
The income,
So it depends on the policy, how the policy is
No, I'm just
essentially.
projecting that, okay, this is what they're looking
Right.
for.
Right.
What-
So if a person, like for example me,
Mhm.
I'm making $36,000. I come there and I say, I want to live in there because I have a 4 3-bedroom apartment I wanted. And you say, okay, good. How much will I have to be paying? That's what I'm looking for.
Right, so just as like a rough estimate, again.
Just rough-
like a-
rough
Just
estimate,
rough
yeah.
estimate, and using 1,600 as an example, you're looking at a unit that will probably cost them about $1,280 or so.
So
Right.
1280, you think a person who is making 36,000 should pay 1280 a month?
Right, so it will be, yeah, it will be discounted based on that 80% AMI, right? So, okay, so say, all right, so say someone can afford let me see how can I better
Can
explain
I ask
this?
it this way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the rent reduced just based on what the rent was? Is it
No.
just a flat reduction of the rent? Or is it tied to the income of the renter?
Let me step in.
Yeah.
So it's, the way that IZ policies work is that it gets the percentage, the affordability percentage gets tied to is part of the policy. So that, kind of answers the question about sort of what the affordability threshold is. At 80% of area median income, that's what the research that's been done for Gainesville shows that is sort of what sort of pencils out for the policy. That area median income is done for Alachua County. It's published by HUD on an annual basis. That's what the policy gets tied to. So those affordable units have to be affordable, meaning that the renters that are going into those units are income qualified, that they meet that 80% of AMI threshold, which is an income threshold, and that their payments to rent and utilities do not exceed 30% of their total income, which is making sure that they're not cost burdened. So it's tied to that published number that HUD produces on an annual basis. So that number is going to change year to year. I mean, it doesn't go up a whole lot, but it varies from year to year.
So for example, we just said AMI was 36,000, let's just use that as an estimate. 80% of 30,000 would be 28,800. So the person would have to make less than, not more than 28,800 to qualify,
Right,
correct?
that's the cap.
Right.
That's the cap.
Yeah.
And they'd have to prove that, like, here's my pay stubs, here's my income, and it verifies, okay. But then, is the rent and utilities 30% of 2880, or is it 30% of what they actually make?
What they make, right?
Right.
It's their
So then,
income, so they.
As the qualifying, they show what they make, and then they're paying 30% of what they make for rent and utilities, which we haven't even gotten into yet, because when you tackle on GRU, then of course things.
And to further,
Next year,
Nothing's gonna
36,000,
balance.
how much the rent is going to be?
If they made 36,000,
Yeah.
the rent would be
Would be 1,600.
would be eight.
Market rate.
No, hold on, that's
No,
a
no, no,
year.
at 36, it's
No,
market
it-
rate, right? 'Cause
At
that's
80%
what
of
they- that's what
AMI,
they- is
the rent,
max.
the rent would be 720.
I missed you.
36,000 is what he figured is the median income in Gainesville.
Right.
That's per year.
Right.
So
Right, right,
if
right.
you
And
make
that's for a
80%
single
of
person.
that over the course of a year, you would qualify. Now, that
So you
that
make
gets
it
you
so
into it.
80% or
That
less.
doesn't answer his question of how much the rent is, and it would be probably 30% of 80% of.
Right, so let's say
36,000.
they made 36,000, let's keep it even.
Yeah,
They made 2880,
yeah,
28,800, which is
okay,
80%.
yeah, that's what I'm
Let's
asking.
say they made exactly that.
Yeah,
Then they would pay 30% of that in rent plus utilities, which is 8640 a year, which is 720 a month. Their rent plus the GRU bill would not be more than 720 a
720.
month.
and the good news of all of this is we don't have to do a lot of complicated math because HUD publishes these numbers on an annual basis. And again, it's both tied to the area median income is tied to the number of people in the household. So a single person, area median income, maybe 36, for a family of 4, that bumps up. And the rents are also, for the different AMI levels, are also tied to the number of bedrooms. So everything from efficiency up to like a 5-bedroom. So those numbers are also adjusted by the actual unit type.
And when we do the tax credit projects, and they put up that one slide that says this is how much we're charging for rent. They actually give us like, in their backup, they give us a lot more than just that one slide. But yeah, it can be adjusted. Well, HUD has a very large table, and you can go to their website. It took me a while. I've seen it. I can't bring it up right this minute. But they do have a website that lists maximum rents by location. Like you can click on Birmingham, Alabama, or Gainesville, Florida. Okay, and then number of the type of apartment. So maximum rents by apartment. And 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms.
Which is basically similar to, Section 8 and stuff like that. They can rent something up to this amount.
Yes,
So it's,
because HUD's making the property owner whole on the other end, right?
Right.
That if you qualify for the HUD program, then the housing authority, whoever,
They
they're,
offset.
HUD is making them whole on the other side.
And if thinking about an IZ policy, it's a good way to think about it because the city's basically doing something similar in that we're making the builder whole by providing a density bonus on the other side. So we're giving more units to balance out their balance sheet, which is both, and Juan will probably get to it, both state law and, best practice for IZ program.
The third bullet point, I think, is also pretty key in that even the city doesn't have to go into that by itself.
Right.
Okay, it talks about housing authorities or a nonprofit organization.
And they're following very well laid out HUD guidelines. It's not like they're making it up whole cloth.
Right.
Right.
And sorry.
Go ahead.
Where we've been, where we've done a few of these sort of deals on an ad hoc basis right now without the benefit of having like an adopted policy, bringing in some of the nonprofit providers like GHA or Alachua County Housing Authority. We both, one, get access to their client list, folks that are already on the wait list for affordable housing. They're already been screened, they're income qualified, and they're in need of housing. And then two, we can also increase the availability of actually exercising vouchers, rental vouchers, because availability of units has been something that we've heard from them over the time that we can give vouchers, but if there's not a unit for that voucher holder to actually reside in, it's not really effective. So those partnerships, although they're not the sort of heart of the policy, they are going to enhance eventually the policy that does get passed with those sort of more formalized arrangements.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And another benefit from IZ is that we do have a lot of examples. So we're not the only municipality that will be doing something like this. This has been done for quite some time by many thousands of municipalities already. So we have a good example of how they've treated this and what has worked for them that we can glean from as well. All right, so the numbers, and as we've alluded to, the proposal is to adopt an ID or inclusionary zoning policy that that has a 10% set aside or 10% affordable housing units for households earning up to 80% AMI, with the option of a fee in lieu of. And let me explain what the fee in lieu of actually is. So when the proposal, the inclusionary zoning proposal that we are pushing for is a mandatory proposal. And by state law, as Andrew mentioned, if we are requiring developers to provide affordable housing units, we have to provide a offset. Thank you. Trying to think of the word, but and the offset that we're providing is a 30% density bonus as of right now. Developers would have the option to, if for whatever reason they can't provide the affordable housing units physically, they will have the option to provide a fee, or in essence pay for the affordable housing that they can't provide, and that fee would be the payment of those housing units at market rate established by HUD again, and when they do that, the affordable housing then can, that fee, should I say, can be used to provide affordable housing in other matters, in other locations, or help programs that do provide affordable housing, or help provide affordable housing.
So that's their buyout to not have to do affordable housing within their,
Well, it would be,
Their
we
area.
would have to, it won't just be like something that they can just say, hey, I don't want to provide affordable
right, well,
housing.
obviously, it goes by, but essentially what it is it's giving them an option to buy out
Correct.
Right.
so they don't have to provide the 10%.
The physical 10%,
Right.
right.
I have questions about that if you leave it on.
Sure. Go ahead, yeah.
Is that a one-time fee? You say reevaluate every 2 years, are the developers paying this fee over time?
It's a one-time fee. What that's alluding to is that because that number of like basically the valuation of a replacement unit, the market's gonna change, construction costs change. So we, as a city, we have to basically rerun our numbers on a 2-year basis to make sure that we're keeping up with, with market conditions essentially.
So I have 2 questions. One, if we don't have a buyout option, I'm guessing, I'm assuming that's an impediment to development. Can we quantify that if we don't have a buyout option? Are developers shying away?
It's a policy decision ultimately. There's pros and cons to, fee in lieu, and I can share like my perspective. I was, kind of dyed in the wool, like down on fee in lieu options, and so some IZ programs have a fee, and a lot of them do have a fee in lieu, some don't. One of the things, obviously if you provide a fee in lieu option, you are going to get, developers paying into the fund and not constructing housing, affordable units with their development. And that obviously is, is a con of it. The one, I think, important pro is that there's been a great deal of discussion both at the city and the county level over last couple of years about the need to start building some internal meaning inside of this Alachua County boundaries capacity for affordable housing funding. That isn't dependent on Sadowski funding limitations or some of those things. A fee in lieu is an option for how we would start to build a fund that money would be earmarked for affordable housing. So the city could, if let's say we adopt an IZ program and it includes a fee in lieu option, and we start to collect fee in lieu payments from developers. And this again gets back to some of the policy, sort of how we structure the policy. That's sort of where, if we want to set a limit on where the fee in lieu sort of applies, project size, some of those things. We start to build a fee in lieu fund. That money could be used for down payment assistance. It could be used for rehab. It could be used for, to support other housing programs that we're doing. One of the benefits of this is, just generally speaking, having a locally dedicated funding source for affordable housing is that we can use the money in more creative ways than what HUD is going to put, restrictions on. Obviously, we have very programmatic limitations on how we use home and ship dollars between the state and the feds. Having a local fee, we can apply that money to different affordable housing needs in the community. So it also provides a little bit of. So that's all to say. My feeling about this is mellowed a little bit over time, especially now that I'm working more closely with housing. I see that there is a need for just having some unrestricted funding that can be used for affordable housing. So pros and cons with the fee in lieu option.
That was my other question, well, at least my other question, because I think for me the biggest con is not that. I very much understand the value of non-designated funds. They're very helpful. My biggest concern is that an in lieu of buyout option leads us further down to economic segregation. I've been on about this, and I know not everyone shares my concern, but I'm going to keep saying it. But this is my biggest concern with, we keep voting to approve Gainesville Housing Authority, and I love them and I know they're doing good work, but we're putting all of our affordable housing, putting all of our poor people in one location. We're not dispersing them to the city. And so call me a socialist, but when I see a building like this, I would love it if there were some expensive condos at the top that people bought and lived in, and so you had rich people. And I'd love some market rate rental housing so you had some average people, and I'd love some 80% AMI and 30% AMI, so you had some poor people, because societies function best when the rich people and the middle class people and the poor people are living in proximity together, not sequestered. I don't know if we're too far down the road. I know that people's eyes glass over every time I say this, but we got to try to not further the economic segregation.
And I think to that point, one of the benefits of an IZ program is the sort of, desegregation along economic lines that it provides, meaning that you have, affordable housing being built alongside market rate housing, and you're creating more mixed income developments, and over time, more mixed income, more mixed income neighborhoods and housing across the city. And obviously, a fee in lieu does blunt that. And I wouldn't say we're too far down the line. These are recommendations that that came out of the IZ analysis, but ultimately they're levers in terms of the policy design that the commission will have to decide on.
Yeah, so the bottom line, not the bottom line, but a bottom line about fee in lieu is if it's not implemented, then by definition, you're going to have mixed income development. Right. If you do use it, then there's discretion based on, whatever guidelines the city puts on itself. Whether that's staff or the commission, or, that sounds like a question they may want AHAC to weigh in on. If they want to get, more community involvement. But basically, it's how the city follows its own guidelines. Like, the city could use the money, to buy land or subsidize the development of affordable housing right next door, or they could go for the cheapest land, which might be on the east side. So just real quick, that's just something to think about.
There is so much confusion about the words inclusionary and exclusionary. Can somebody explain it to me? What does that inclusionary zoning means?
That's what we're talking about, is requiring affordable housing with market rate housing.
No, where? I think the question is, in the outside, when the people are talking about where would these buildings be put?
It would be everything, because we're talking not about a specific location, we're talking about a policy. So everything basically that would be created with 10 or more units would have this requirement.
Every multifamily development within city limits.
Yes.
It's a citywide policy.
No, I understand the policy, but...
Right, but that means it's citywide. That means it would apply to every multifamily development of 10 or more units anywhere in the city.
Anywhere it's getting built.
Any new development.
Right, I
essentially.
get that look all the time.
Any new
People say,
That's what I'm asking.
That's why I say,
Confusion.
there was a proposal to put a portion of a property adjacent to 13th Street to make a portion of that affordable through an agreement with the Gainesville Housing Authority. The first thing someone said to me, and this is a smart, educated person who's very familiar with East Side issues and everything, she said, oh, that's student housing. Well, if this rule was in place, it wouldn't have to be. Okay, so this is a change. This is a change from how Gainesville's development regulations have been in place. So this is new and different.
Right. And just touching back on the fee and lieu, I alluded to it in some of my comments. One, thing to keep in mind is it doesn't necessarily have to be an all or nothing, arrangement. When we were speaking to the city plan board last week about this, and there was a few members that expressed concern that some of those smaller developments where they're building, like literally building, 11, 12 units, they may not be sort of able to, enter into a contract with like the housing authority or the community land trust or whoever, they may be a good candidate for the fee in lieu because they're building a small number of units. So one way that that this could be structured is you have, a range, maybe whatever, 11 to 20 units, you could do the fee in lieu. Above 20, you have to build on site. So I mean, there's some flexibility. It doesn't necessarily have to be a decision that either we throw the fee in lieu out or we keep it and apply it everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, it's funny, because we've kind of talked about a lot of audience
Next
size.
slide.
Yeah, right. So, in order for this to get adopted, if you will, or to actually put this tool in motion, there are several things that need to happen. The first thing is we need to amend our comprehensive plan in order for it to be allowed. And the way we need to amend our comprehensive plan is we need to add text and language that would allow for any land use that allows multifamily to allow for a bonus to that already established density, right? And so we currently don't have that language, and one of the proposals associated with this is to add that language. So pretty straightforward, and this is an example of what that would look like. It's just a matter of adding a addition to a sentence that in essence says how many additional units can be added via the bonus provision. And then we already mentioned this already, but anywhere where multifamily development can occur would be fair game for inclusionary zoning. So these are the land uses that allows for multifamily to occur, and that's where we would add, in essence, that density bonus provision language. So pretty straightforward. Any questions so far on that? Okay. And then the second part is a bit more nuanced. So currently within our land development code, we have something that's called a density bonus manual. And that manual is something that has seldom been used. It's an old manual. It was created back in 2005. So it's outdated for sure. But in essence, the manual has some criteria that if a developer meets, they get points, and as much points as they can accumulate, they get a density bonus based on that. A lot of those criteria and recommendations are fairly outdated, and the manual does not include new zoning such as transit zoning, which also allows for multifamily. So one of the proposals is to eliminate the manual and to use the affordable housing provisions as that density bonus. So if a developer wants density bonus, they can do two things. They can either preserve a high quality tree, and that will give them some density bonus because that's already laid out in our land development code. And the other thing is that they can provide affordable housing, and that will also give them the density bonus based on the inclusionary zone proposal. And then, of course, we need to write the proposal language into our land development code. Again, and that's what that looks like. It's a lot of blue text, but in essence is saying what we just mentioned, that if a developer provides 10% affordable housing for people earning 80% of the area median income, they would be there would be a set aside for them of 30% density bonus based on other guidelines, and the provided units will have to be agreed to be available for the in perpetuity, so for the life of the project. And that's, am I missing anything? And that's, again, just a rundown of basically what we've just mentioned here. Again, this is for developments that provide 10 units or more. If a development provides less units than 10, they would be given the option to enter into, to provide affordable housing units voluntarily, and then they would be given that density bonus with that. But they wouldn't be required to add the affordable housing units. But if the unit does provide 10 units, or excuse me, if the development provides 10 units, that's kind of that threshold, they would be required to provide affordable housing. And as we mentioned, the units provided will have to be comparable to the market rate market rate units, in looks, materials used to create them, the time when those units would be available. So a development can't come in and say, hey, we're gonna provide all these wonderful market rate units, right? And then these affordable units, we're just gonna not let people move in. We're gonna let the people that can pay up front for much higher price units first, and then we'll figure out the rest. They can't do that. Everything has to be available at the same time. And that goes along with same services provided, so parking, amenities, all of that would have to be provided with affordable units, like they will be provided for the market rate units as well. Another thing that I wanted to mention earlier is that the units provided within the development will have to be reasonably dispersed. So there can't be one area that's specific for, excuse me, I'm trying to hold the seat. There can be one area that's specific for affordable housing units. They're dispersed. So they're completely indistinguishable from any of the other units, and that's intentional. And I think that's it. Yep. So, thank you. Oh, I did want to mention some of the concerns, and I didn't put a slide on here, but some of the concerns we've already kind of touched on, but that was brought up by the City Plan Board, along with just some discussions on how this agreement will look like with a third party. It's also the process involved with getting an agreement between a third party and a developer that wants to provide affordable housing units. It's just simplifying that process. That's been one of and of course, Andrew mentioned the concern about, developments that are offering on the lower end, of affordable housing, so like 10 units, 11 units, or something along those lines, and having the ability to not go through a complicated process, but be able to pay that fee in lieu of, and that will be more advantageous for them, and also easier for us to be able to use those funds in a more efficient way to provide more affordable housing. Is there anything else I'm forgetting?
Yeah, there was some discussion, and we like Juan said, we talked to the plan board last week, and we'll talk to them again, I think on the 9th. And so we talked about that we're coming to AHAC, and we would share any of the feedback, the initial feedback that we got from the plan board. So there are a couple of other things, all the things that Juan had mentioned. They had a fair amount of discussion about whether this should be an incentive, voluntary versus a mandatory program. And so that's, again, all of these that are like levers in terms of the policy design. So whether it's a mandatory program or a voluntary program, that is a decision point. From staff's perspective, we are recommending that it's a mandatory program. The plan board, they haven't taken any votes because they're still discussing it, of course. But a lot of the discussion last week was, they seemed to be leaning towards more recommending that it was a voluntary program. So we wanted to share that. They also discussed, and I think this actually is a good idea, they also discussed whether we could provide, in exchange for lower AMI set aside, or a greater number of units set aside, additional density above the 30%. And so we talked a little bit about that at the meeting as well. And I think what I had suggested is that, so we know based on all of the the data that was prepared, that like Gainesville can support a mandatory program of 10% of the total units for 10 unit and above developments at 80% of AMI in perpetuity. That's not to say that we can't provide additional voluntary incentive of additional density in exchange for lower AMI or greater set aside. So we could potentially create a program where we have a mandatory component, which is our baseline, and then provide, let's say we have a developer who just really loves building affordable housing, or in other words, like needs, additional density above 30%, what we can offer through the program, we can provide that flexibility that they can get some additional density in exchange for deeper affordability or greater set aside of units. So those are some of like the kind of policy, pieces that, we're continuing to sort of flesh out, and obviously want to get the board's input here. But I think that covers most of the plan board discussion, their initial discussion, so. And we told them that we would bring back any feedback this board had to their next meeting on the 9th.
I have a question back on the page where you have precedents, and you have a number of cities listed here. Do you have any cities that are comparable to us? These are very large cities. I'm thinking like Chapel Hill, maybe Ann Arbor, Athens, New Haven, Connecticut, like other like small college towns with restricted, like, the college itself places, I lived in Raleigh for a long time. Chapel Hill's like its own thing, because the university is such a behemoth.
Right.
Right.
Like Duke and Durham have their own relationship in terms of the city.
Right.
Chapel Hill's not a city.
Right. So
It's a town.
North Carolina is actually preempted to do, they can't do inclusionary zoning.
Okay.
Yeah, they're a Dillon rule state, so they actually can't do it. Tallahassee has a form of inclusionary zoning that they've had on the books for a while, but my understanding is not been particularly successful. Perhaps the best sort of closest example is Palm Coast, of all places. They actually have had, they're the most recent jurisdiction in Florida to have adopted a mandatory IZ program. Theirs has been, I think, on the books maybe for better part of a decade, I think. They've produced roughly, I think, about 1,400 affordable housing units. We would be the first jurisdiction to adopt an IZ policy since state law changed a few years ago, with that piece about requiring that the balance sheet equals out. But I would say those things are they're valuable for context in terms of seeing that there are other jurisdictions that are doing IZ programs. But when you look outside of the state of Florida, it's only as helpful as it is until it's not. And our sort of policy framework is going to be tied to our local market, because ultimately, at the end of the day, an inclusionary zoning program is a market-based approach. It's a market-based housing policy, and I would definitely. I would say this because you all work in the sphere and obviously deal with housing. IZ policies, because they're market based, they are sort of, think about it as we're skimming the cream off the top of development. They sit on top of market rate development, and they leverage the private development market to have an additional bottom line, which is affordable housing. They're not it's not a substitute for robust public housing or any of the other ways that the city is tackling housing. but it's an additive, I think, to the overall sort of tools in the toolbox. It opens up, I think, a lot of opportunities for partnership with other providers. It may, as we talked about, offer a potential funding source, and then ultimately it has a desegregation effect by mixing income levels in the same development, which is a value unto itself. We are blessed here in Gainesville with having a strong housing market, albeit, as Juan indicated, clustered sort of on two sides of the spectrum. We have, single-family house building, and we have, mid and high-rise student housing. That's primarily what gets built in Gainesville. So we're really kind of focusing on the multifamily that's getting built, and using that market, that good and strong market that we have to also provide affordable housing as part of this IZ program. So I wouldn't we wouldn't sit up here and tell you that this is like the end all be all panacea, solve all of the world's housing problems, because that thing doesn't exist. But I think it is a important and missing tool that we have, that we've talked about for quite a long time, but I think we're actually really close to putting something into place.
So I'm gonna stick on the precedents where he's at as well. As far as, and again, I would like to also see some smaller cities, if we know of any that we can kind of compare to. But of these, are these all mandatory? Are these also voluntary? What has been kind of what you've seen in the ones that you've looked at?
So they're across the board. I mean, like I said, they vary. Some provide voluntary, some provide mandatory, and then the numbers also change depending on their individual markets. So some, provide 10%, other provides 20%, with different type of bonuses associated with them. So it just depends on their markets, what they feel is feasible and speaks to.
Yeah, and politically, I'd say, obviously a voluntary program is a lot easier to pass than a mandatory one.
Right. Well, I mean, and it's also developers, if they have a potential to build here or to build somewhere else that doesn't have, mandatory, it's gonna be, up in the air, especially with construction costs what they are, it's not cheap to build. And I think it's great that they get the bonus, but they still have to pay to build all those additional units, So as far as student housing, because clearly we've got tons and tons and tons, how would this affect student housing developers?
The same, yeah, the same. They would have the same requirements as any other, market rate developer.
Okay. All right, that was my questions.
Yep, any other questions? Okay. That's a lot first that you on. And so now we need to talk about the second thing the city has asked us to do, take the lead in community engagement.
Right. And I'll welcome, Andrew's going to jump right in or not. But when we've talked about this, the direction, I wasn't at the meeting, but the direction that I understand came down from the city commission, or the request, I shouldn't say the direction to staff, but the request to y'all, was that you take the lead in implementing community engagement around inclusionary zoning, inclusionary policies. So I guess the way to at least take a first kind of bite at that apple is, how would you like to see that done? Do you have ideas of what kind of engagement is good? And I don't know if we have, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but yeah, if you have ideas of what works well, and how you'd like to see it started out, and then maybe we can get a little more specific, and think about AHAC taking the lead. Think about AHAC doing the implementing, running the meeting, asking the questions, setting it up, and those kind of things. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think that was it. We spoke to the commission at general policy meeting a few weeks ago about this, and Commissioner Chestnut brought up the role of AHAC and how AHAC can be like instrumental in essentially, as John said, like leading the community engagement effort, and hosting meetings in the community, and talking about bringing creating venues for this, for Ron and sustainable development staff to come and speak about inclusionary zoning. And so I think that's some of what we kind of want to start talking about, nailing down, is what's an appropriate number of meetings, where should the meetings occur, what groups should we talk to, some of those questions that we want to hammer out.
So, my thing is, we've seen how challenging it's been for us to understand, what inclusionary zoning is. So I think the biggest thing would be an education piece, but something that's gonna kind of boil it down to, because as far as, I'm part of the community. If I am wanting to be able to take advantage of, this new policy and, know about inclusionary zoning, but really, how much am I doing to change that? I think the community part, unless you're talking about a community of developers, the community part comes in once we have approved stuff, and then we can let them know, hey, we've got these programs available. But I just, in a sense, and obviously we want people to understand because we want people to vote. But we just really have to find the simplest way to be able to explain it, because it's super confusing. We had talked about it, the inclusionary, and we definitely have to work on that piece, I think, before we kind of figure who's our target gonna be. Our target is the whole community, obviously, right? But as far as understanding this whole thing, and we've been talking about this already for a while, and it's still confusing to us, certain parts of it. And obviously, it's something that's developing, because we don't know what the policies are yet. We don't know, so that adds to our confusion clearly. But I think depending on what it is exactly that we're trying to get across here is how we're gonna be able to decide who it is and how it is that we're gonna reach people, because we've already talked about, all the outreach that we can do now, that we've kind of all put our heads together. So I think we have a lot of venues and a lot of things that we wanna do. But I think the package has to be a little bit more congealed before we're able to kind of present that.
A more finished product before we bring it before it's rolled out. Yeah.
Well, the way I think I would say that is we have to translate it out of policyese into more narrative forms. And I think maybe that's something that we can help with. As you guys think policy, you talk policy, and policy is its own language, right?
Yeah.
And that's not a knock, it's just, somebody's gotta get in the weeds. But we're not staff, and we're not commission. And so, if we can communicate layperson to layperson in this context, then I think that's one help. Is, it does take us a while to wrap our heads around it, and we'll deal with, now we can tell you the story.
Right.
The story starts with, there's not enough housing, everybody knows that. There's not enough affordable housing, yeah. So here's a solution, And instead of showing you the chart or table, say, let's say you make 35,000 a year, and just like make, those some accurate numbers in a hypothetical scenario that people can wrap their heads around, and tell the story. And as long as we're telling the story accurate, which is why you need you to be like, yeah, you're telling that part wrong, then I think people can get their heads around that much easier. And so we can both educate and I think it's translation is the key there. And I think we can help with that. The other parts, to me, is listening. It's not just disseminating the information, but it's listening to the community. As we've seen, I think this won't be new information to you, a lot of our citizens don't feel heard. And so when we come to these meetings, like Commissioner Chestnut had one, recently, and the church was packed, and the temperature was very hot. I don't mean the AC was working fine. The temperature in the room was very warm. People were very upset, right? And I've noticed that they tend to lash out at commissioners. They tend to lash out at y'all because you're city staff. They're not gonna lash out at me because, like, I'm just an average Joe like you. What are you yelling at me for? And so I've told Commissioner Chestnut and I had this conversation. This is a role we can serve as both the buffer and the sounding board. Like, let me hear what you're saying, because you also, when folks are so upset, they're not really fully communicating. I mean, they're communicating their emotion, which is good. When you get riled up, you're also not able to communicate what you're really upset about as much as you can when you like calm down. What are you really concerned about? Let's get down to it. Not that you're not upset. I'm not trying to dismiss the emotion. The emotion's important. But just sort of bring the temperature down, make sure everyone's heard, and then again do the work of translation from them to y'all and to the commission, so that you have been heard. And I can come back to you and say you were heard to the point that it affected the policy. Like, the other part of being heard is like, you say to your kids, do you hear me? I don't mean, are your ears working? I mean, are you actually gonna go clean your room now that I've said it 3 times? Do you hear me? Right, so that's part of it too. Like, is the feedback being received and affecting what we do policy-wise? And we have to go back and communicate, yeah, they heard you, and they tweaked it, they changed it, commensurate with what your concerns were. And I do think that's what we've been envisioning for this group, is the ability to be that go-between between the people that have very, very serious concerns about housing, but also the very serious concerns that y'all have about the fact that there is no housing, and we have to take action, because what are we gonna do if we don't have any housing? All right, I'll stop talking.
Am I the only one who is thinking that there is an election on November 8th? And the 2 mayor candidates and the others, they're against the inclusionary zoning? And what will happen after that election?
That's a different thing.
This is different than that.
But what's the difference? That's what I'm trying to figure out. If I don't understand it, I don't know, somebody else understands it.
That's about single families. That's about changing what's allowable in homeowner-based neighborhoods.
Okay.
This is talking about like multi-family, like apartment complexes, how we get.
That's what my question was, where would these be put? That's what the question is, when the people are concerned about it.
Be on land that's already approved for mixed use, or that's already zoned for apartment
Multifamily, all
complexes.
of these,
Yeah, so,
these are the ones,
This isn't about changing what's allowable.
anything that's
But-
within that,
That covers almost everything, isn't it?
No,
So that's the point, that we have to, when we are talking about how to talk to the
right?
No,
we have to make it very clear. So,
I absolutely hear you, and I think it's the part of the thing that has so many people confused, that we're
Yeah.
bringing 2 things that sound somewhat alike, right? Like exclusionary zoning, inclusionary zoning. Like if you're not familiar with planning lingo, you're like, what's going on? With exclusionary zoning, you're thinking of, okay, so let me backtrack. There's property in Gainesville that only allows for 1 house to be built on a property. So in essence, they exclude everything else. You can only do that 1 house right here. And so that is the exclusionary zoning proposal that we brought up that basically tries to provide more different types of housing within those properties. But that's different than this, right? That's dealing with the parts of Gainesville that only allows for one house. That's over here. And there's a lot of land that does that, but that's over here. What we're talking about here is land in Gainesville that allows for multifamily. So think of
No, I
apartments.
understand. I'm just talking about the general public when we are talking about it.
Right.
We should go and talk to the people. This is what we have to explain, because I think, as you mentioned it, with Commissioner Chestnut's thing, I don't think 80% of the people could not distinguish between these two, and that's where the thing
Well,
comes in.
and part of it is like we have seen some fairly large developments go up really close to some single-family neighborhoods. Like, oh, that zoning, those are different zonings, but man, they're really not far apart.
Yeah, the
from each other.
visuals are there.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
You've got these old tiny houses next to one of these things, and so it's,
So, I mean, I think the part that our group can play, first thing is, we have to become very clear what we are talking about. And that's what you were saying, that it should be, our language should be clear, that and then we need to have meetings like Commissioner Chestnut had. So many people showed up there. And the same kind of thing, and the other thing is, City of Gainesville had two meetings. One is Martin Luther King Center, you remember, where all the departments were there?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, city services.
Somewhere, we should have something on that level where somebody is sitting there tabling it and talking to the people who want to know something like this. So there are two different ways of doing it, don't you think? I mean, one thing is, like Commissioner Chestnut did, I'm sure there are other people who can do that kind of a thing, where you go there, but again, as we were talking about, very specific, that, okay, this is not, we are not talking about, we are talking about this. And then on those where the City of Gainesville is talking about all the other programs, this is also one of the programs. And that's how we should be doing it.
And I guess I want to make sure that I think to Professor Rayburn's point, I think where the board comes in is being the lead on those things. So the board would be the one who would be setting up some of these events that you're alluding to. So where the board can be both the sounding board, the sympathetic ear, the listening, the buffer, all the things that, all the ideas that were talked about. Yeah.
I mean, I'm open to that, but I mean, we don't have a quorum, so we can't, like, I don't know, we can't.
Now we assign all the members who aren't here, all of the, you're on charge of food, you're in charge of venue, you're in charge of inviting people.
But yeah, and I think just logistically, like, spreading them out, all across the city, east, west, north, south. Getting them in non-city buildings, having churches host them, community centers host them. And just get off city property is helpful as well. No dais, no stage, that's bad. Those are bad optics. And just, because it needs to be that listing piece is not pro forma, that's really central. But I think we have folks that could do that on this group, and I can't speak for the others that aren't here, but we have talked about this before, and I think there would be a willingness on our part to do that. I don't know, what's the time frame on this though?
So, the timeframe is both constrained somewhat in that, we don't want to be July of next year still talking about this.
Sure.
Because obviously,
Right.
The longer that we don't have a policy, the more development is getting approved without any affordable housing component. I think in an ideal world, we would do some of the engagement, outreach, component before the end of the year, we may have a little spillover, depending on, with the holidays and everything. But we would really like to try to get that component done, by probably mid-January if possible. Now, the commission, when they talked about this at GPC, majority of them voted for us to try to work to bring the second reading of the ordinance back by the end of the year. But I don't feel that is a realistic timeline. With also trying to do some engagement and having to go through just the normal legislative process that we have to with city plan board, city commission, city attorney's office, drafting ordinances. So there is a I think an urgency to
Right.
doing this, but not from my standpoint. I think we will move it along as expeditiously as the process needs to be without, sacrificing the end result, which is, being able to bring people along, make sure people understand, and ultimately, have a successful policy at the end of the day.
So the commission said they wanted to vote on this before the new commission is sat.
That's what the discussion was.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
I
I
won't be
just,
part of that.
yeah,
That's a bad
it's,
idea.
and that's not from staff's perspective.
Sure.
That timeline is just, it's not feasible, so.
Yeah, that's not.
But I think the intent is obviously that there is urgency with this, and from our standpoint, I definitely want to get this policy in place so we can start, getting the benefits of having it in place. I definitely don't want to be talking about this still, about doing outreach, in summer of next year.
I agree.
Well, I think one of the things that would be hugely beneficial to us so that we can kind of know what we can present would be, and I'm asking for myself, I need inclusionary zoning for dummies, exclusionary zoning for dummies.
Yeah.
I just need, because we are gonna have to be able to explain exclusionary zoning so they understand the difference between the two. We can't just tell them, oh no, that's different, this is something else, because, you have that. And for me, if I'm not clear on something, I'm not supporting it. I want to know exactly what it is that you're asking me to back, and I assume that the rest of my community is the same, we're happy to participate, but we need to kind of be clear. And
I agree with the being clear part, but I would say that I don't feel like we have to agree to anything to be the voice of here's what's happening. What do you think about it? I'm not saying I can educate you on anything, whether I agree with it. I can give you a lecture right now on Nazi Germany. That does not mean that I agree with them at all. But if you want to know about it, sure, let's talk about it. So I think we can educate folks on the thing. That's for sure. Without saying that we can be clear on that. We're not advocating one way or another.
Right.
And some of this is pretty fine, nuanced, distinctions anyway. But part of that whole temperature thing, people just need some information. Part of the reason things have gotten so hot is they've not gotten any information. And then they've gotten it from people that are out there
and confusion.
stoking it, the confusion,
And
not.
confusion causes frustration,
Yes.
and, once you're frustrated, you don't even want to hear it anymore.
That's right.
And we need people to understand what it is.
That's right.
So, two things I'm hearing, this isn't going to close the discussion, but two things I'm hearing is that you all are on board with explaining, with being the voice, explaining things to the community. And I'm hearing two things. One is venue. You haven't said how many times you want to do this, but the idea, like Pastor Raven was saying, get out of city building, that you guys can suggest buildings. Okay, you can give us, you say, here's a good place for you to meet. And you can tell us that, okay? That y'all can use your connections, and we should set it up for those, and you can do the presentations, essentially. If you need some coaching or some statistics, maybe we can help you with that. But Yeah, those are two boxes we can check. It is, you know, who's talking, and you're gonna come back with some, you know, at least one good spot. You know, we can, through an email, we can ask the others, you know, to at least provide that information, and that can be finalized. To do this by, you know, by mid-January, I mean, we've got a meeting scheduled in this. I guess the other thing I'm hearing, before we even talk about how many meetings, is y'all are looking for more information. So, I don't know, websites, links,
Yeah, you got like a 20-minute YouTube video you can send.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I don't wanna just flood you with like, you know, with, look at this website, look at, you know, read this 75-page document. Like, we can basically prepare an IZ for dummies, like where it's like, you know, one sheet.
That's what I think.
Yeah, one sheet, like this is what it is, plain language. We'll work with the wonderful comms and community relations office to make sure it's, you know, it's been stripped of any planner language, so that it's understandable. Because I mean, I do think, you know, maybe development community aside, this should be something that is like really easy to support for your average citizen. Like, if you walk up to somebody, you know, nobody likes development, right? That's like, generally speaking, like if you're a developer, you're not always a very popular person. But if you walk up to your average Gainesville citizen and say, hey, do you support requiring affordable housing to be built with, market rate housing? You know, with a simple enough question like that, most people are going to be like, well, yes, I do. You know, I support affordable housing, and I would support that. So we should be able to message that and provide materials that, you know, ultimately underscore that basic concept without getting too far into the weeds or the, you know, minutia of the policy. The policy stuff in the minutia, it's going to be necessary to go through the legislative process, but not necessary to just to talk to regular people about, you know, why this is something that, you know, they should consider. So we can prepare some materials and kind of shop it to the board and, you know, get some feedback.
You've been really quiet. Do you want to? You okay?
You all have basically stated some things that Apple's concerned about, so, but I'm okay.
I'm gonna try to put you on the spot, but in terms of number of them, I would think maybe like one per district,
Yeah.
or at least one per quadrant, but I think one per district would maybe be ideal.
We just, wearing my other hat in parks, like we just did some, district by district needs assessment. We're updating our parks master plan, so we did one meeting in each district and did it in similar to, I think, some of the format that we're talking about, which is less of a sort of presentation, you know, to whoever's there, and more of like an open house where we have materials, we have staff there to listen, have conversations, you know, with folks that show up, maybe have some handouts or materials to take away, kind of information sharing, and listening, as opposed to like the city just, you know, presenting to folks. So.
Yeah, I think if it's something where we can give them, you know, bare bones, and then give them things if they want to continue looking, you know, if we have things that they can take with them where they can, you know, continue. Some people are going to really want to read into it, other people are just going to be okay with, oh, okay. But I would like to be able to have that to give to whoever comes. And, you know, community centers, I think, are excellent.
Yeah.
You know, so we can definitely see what we can do as far as that.
The only thing, most community centers, I know not all community centers, like there's the YMCA and a lot of, like you said, places of worship have community centers and, nonprofit organizations and fraternal organizations. Okay, so we could probably check both boxes, you know, getting out of the city's house, you know, do it in the community's house, but also do a community center.
What do you mean, not the city-related buildings?
Like not having it at
Oh,
City
yeah,
Hall, not
but
having it on tops.
MLK Center, you okay?
That's City Hall, that's still City Hall. I mean, I like it, but it's still City Hall.
Dave and Buster's.
Well,
Put
I was
front
gonna
in
say,
affordable housing.
the other key is food first.
Sure, yep.
Don't have the whole meeting and then have the food. Everybody gets hankering.
People don't listen
Yeah,
to you
give
if
them
they're
the food
hungry.
first.
That's very true.
Oh, then they will let everyone in, they take the bus
Well,
and get out the other
But
door.
when people eat together,
Yes.
they bond together. So you gotta break bread.
Big red. Well, however, if they eat too much, then they fall asleep. So, it's okay.
Just a coffee and donut, forget about anything.
So I think, can we carry this on by email a little bit? We need to inform our other members.
Okay, so tomorrow, hopefully tomorrow, so before the end of this week, one of my jobs is gonna be send an email to all of the members, okay? Saying, give me a good location, that we discussed this. And this isn't John's idea, this is, the member's idea is, send me a location, you know? And that's number one. And number two, I'll probably just summarize that you guys can be a voice to disseminate information, not necessarily to take it. You know, if you want to take a stand or not stand an opinion, you can, but at a minimum, to disseminate information, you know, an unbiased source of good information, good solid, you know, information. And you said, you know, I didn't write that down, but you said one per district for like city commission district?
Yeah.
Okay, so 4 meetings, okay, okay. So our next scheduled AHAC meeting is December 13th, okay? That's the second Tuesday in December. I know December gets hairy, but it's relatively early in December. All right, so do we want to have one more like organizational meeting? Or, okay, that means we're probably, I don't know if we can have 4 meetings in January, or if we want to, you know, do you think 4 is necessary?
No,
Or do you think 4 is just a good number?
I think 4 is a good number. I think we could be done by March 1st. And if we're overlapping with the reading, like if they've done the first reading and we're not done yet, I think that's okay, because they can make modifications between the first and the second reading. So as long as the second reading is not till the first week of March, which is way before summer, I think that's doable, because the holidays are up there.
Yeah, definitely.
Anyway, I think your idea that you write down something and send it out to us, explaining what we will be talking to the public, that would be a good idea.
And do we have serious business on the December meeting, or can we make this a focus?
No, yeah, I think it's pretty clear that at least for the end of this year and the beginning of next year, this is the focus. I mean, we can give a report saying, you know, the city commission adopted the incentives report. It needs to be sent by the end of the year to Tallahassee. On November 17th, they're probably going to do the tax credit recommendation that y'all made. So I can give you an update on that, you know.
Okay, this seems doable for us then. Is that too much on y'all? You okay?
No, I think the city, I don't even know if I want to speak on what I think the city commission wants, but
No, I meant for y'all, for staff, is this too much of a burden for y'all? I think this is doable, because I know it's always that.
to have 4 meetings by mid-March.
By first of all.
Okay, by March
It'll
1.
be
All right, so,
March.
no, that's, Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we, as long as y'all have no issue with it, I mean, we can, we can try, to, and I mean, meeting all the, various directives. We can try to look at January and see if we can cluster, a number of the meetings. Because you guys are saying, you're not saying, you're just saying let's try to get it done by March. But if we can get meetings scheduled in January or January and February, y'all are fine with that. And
That's what I was thinking.
yeah.
If you did 2 in January, 2 in February.
The only other thing, right, so, I'll just throw this out there just so everybody knows, because I'm not sure how much we want to overlap. I think what we want to do is, we want to have one kind of regular business AHAC meeting in the first quarter. That's not totally inclusionary zoning focused. And that's going to be just to go over our local housing assistance plan, which is funding, Andrew mentioned the Sadowski Act, we talked about the SHIP, that's kind of the same thing, right? Just our programs that we use and how we spend that, okay? As opposed to all the, to like a regulatory approach, right? A different tool in the toolbox, okay? So, but if we have one of those before we start taking it to because that's due at the end of April.
So I would think if we spend our December meeting planning this out, and we have one of the meetings before our January meeting, we can spend some of the January meeting debriefing and making adjustments. At that point, I don't think we need any more conversation in our meeting about the event until it's roll.
Right,
And
because
so our
we have the information.
Yeah, we'll have already had one, we'll have already given ourselves feedback, so our February meeting, we could be doing what you're saying. Oh, wait, I can come, oh, yeah, okay. I would anticipate.
All right. We have one of our assistant city managers, and our special advisor, our head of all communication and outreach.
No.
Queen of everything. Queen of everything.
Someone who has her finger on the pulse of the community, maybe wants to give some good ideas.
Good
Yes.
evening, Yvette Carter. I do work out of the city manager's office. Also, I work for the general manager at GRU. So my team handles government affairs and community relations across the city. And there are some familiar faces here. So what I just wanted to add is there are already some organized groups that are meeting regularly. One group in particular meets every Monday. And I think you will get a good swath of the community by co-sharing that space. You just would need to get permission from that chair. It's called the East Gainesville Alliance, I believe. And there's a possibility that you could have one meeting done before the end of this year because they literally meet every Monday. So, and those meetings are well attended, and I think if it were advertised properly, you would be able to have more folks come. The second thing I wanted to suggest or add for your consideration is the districts are kind of wonky how they're drawn. If you wanted to do 4 meetings and try to get areas of town, I would suggest doing the quadrants as opposed to the districts. Not that any district is more important than the other, but there are some mobility issues in some. So like District 1 is kind of a long, big space. So if you just do one meeting in District 1 and maybe Southwest Gainesville or Southeast Gainesville, you will miss folks who may not be able to travel down. So as my office thinks about meetings, we think about there may not be equal, like one in each part of town, but folks who have transportation freedom and no limitations for work and childcare may be able to travel a little bit further. And folks who are interested in learning about the topic will travel. The third thing I'll say, and then I'll go sit down and shut up because I know if you're like me, you've had a day. The third thing I'll say is we host a city services fair. We've had 2 already, and there will be an opportunity to have this setting or at least a table or somewhere we can feature this in our 3rd, and we are looking at having that in January. So that may be an opportunity. We haven't decided a final spot, but I know that we are really interested in having it at the senior center, which would be, I think, northwest. So that's a place of interest for us to host one of our events, City Services Fair, and there are multiple rooms there. So even if we needed to rent an additional space for you all to have like a breakout, we would be willing to do that. So that's all I wanted to say.
That was really good. I appreciate all that.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
then-
I like your
Do
approach.
you, I guess, so, in terms of outside of the meetings that Yvette outlined, does the board have a sense, or do you guys have a feeling for, like, format? I mean, I mentioned, a couple different formats, either a setting where we as staff get up, give like a formal presentation with the audience and take questions, back and forth. That's one format. An open house type of format where we have staff and you all there to like have more, one-on-one interaction, with maybe some props or, boards or what have you. That's another way, I guess, that I wanted to, so that way as we're kind of planning, it helps us know, what are the, what are we planning for?
I think the city services fair that we had in the past, that.
We've had a couple
So
of them.
one of those, in the city services fair, if it is done in senior center, we could actually do what you're suggesting, one-on-one type thing. If we have all the information there, you can actually have tabling basically, and people can come in and ask the question and we answer, and all of us should be there. Not all of us, I mean, people who are available. And as we just discussed it, something in very simple language explaining the information that we are trying to do. So one of those things can be done at that city services fair. Others could be different style.
Yeah, I would think, I was thinking more of like, similar to what Commissioner Chestnut had, except for the food up front. So folks are snacking. Oh, I'm serious. Yeah, like a town hall.
I like
Town hall, yes.
Yeah, like a town hall, they get their snacks, and then one of us, or multiple of us on the AHAC give a narrative presentation of this, and then we open it and take Q&A, and we field the questions. So literally, they're not, I mean, you can be there as like backup if we get too far in the weeds, but like,
Be our safety net.
be our safety net, but like literally like let them, because they're not gonna yell at us, you know?
You never know,
They're
hey.
not.
Yeah,
They just don't, people don't yell, it's fine. Cause I'm like, you yelling at me for, I can do nothing, so, but we can keep it more friendly and more, again, temperature down. And also just like move on, right? It's still, it's a little easier for me to be like, all right, thank you for sharing, Ms. Tansman, we're gonna move on to the next person. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, I want you to send me, send me specific venues, but yeah, we get it. Definitely one thing is participate in the city services fair. But definitely participate in the city services fair, definitely have these handouts, answer questions. Create the IZ and easy for dummies, that's, we know what you mean, right? So that everybody, all AHAC has it. I think think there's rules, I don't know that, like if the city services fair is 3 hours, we may have to get 3 volunteers to each do an hour, or 6 to do a half an hour, because, you know, for government in the sunshine, you know, what you're supposed to talk about, kind of thing, to break it up. The staff can be there the whole morning. But yeah, so we're gonna probably be asking, you know, for volunteers to do that. But yeah, we're also hearing, do it as a town hall, have some food first, so you can I'll ask for ideas about food and the whole organizing and all that. But yeah, and to make a presentation, I'm hearing that 2 things. I'm hearing that as an initial moderator for our town hall, that you know, you feel comfortable doing that.
Jamie can do it.
I know Jamie can do it. I was gonna say, we definitely will feel comfortable doing that, y'all, right? So we'll ask.
As long as we have them sitting right behind us, if we don't have a question, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
So as far as the type of meetings, I would say that we would be more like a little, like what you guys are gonna do with the city services, like an open house kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you guys want to make a presentation in that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to explain what that's
Right.
going on.
Right, what's the purpose of,
Right.
you know,
Not,
this meeting?
and so, again, not an open Q&A, don't come in here talking something we're not talking about, no, we're talking about this.
Right.
Don't, you know, that's not what this is about this.
I
So they
think
start talking about family, single families, like, that's not,
Right.
that's.
that's the main issue, will be to explain it.
Yep.
But again, the town hall can be held at East Gainesville Alliance, as Yvette was talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, just get with the coordinators of that, and you have Mr. Fields' contact information, right? Wayne Fields? We can get you the contact information
Okay.
for
Thank you.
the folks.
Are we good?
I think we just need to agree that we're going to do one more organizational meeting December 13th, and then we're going to try to have 4 meetings, try to have at least one of them, maybe with East Gainesville Alliance prior, maybe as a town hall with food prior to the end of the year, and then maybe have quick succession once the new year comes. Well, if we have one before the end of the year with the East Gainesville Alliance, then we have one in January at the City Services Fair. The City Services Fair is going to be less presentation, more just tabling. Okay, and then maybe 2 others. All right. Okay. Okay. So I think we're good till the 13th. You're going to want some more information and summaries sent out. Okay.
All right, let's move us on to public comment.
I was holding my breath, gritting my teeth, wondering if you would do it. On the issue of engagement, there are several other, in addition to the ones she mentioned, there are several organizations. The Alachua County Labor Coalition has a housing committee. The NAACP has a housing committee. There's a couple others I'm trying to think of. United Gainesville Community Ministries does a big housing work. You could include these groups in the planning committee now as you plan these events, and you'll be building your audience. And no disrespect to the city staff's efforts, but I frequently see them do these series of meetings. 10 people come. They never run out of copies because there's so much more material than people that attend. So you're building the audience before it comes. There's some other groups with housing sections I'm trying to think of. The United Church of Gainesville has a housing committee. The Social Concerns Committee at Unitarian has a housing committee. So connect with these grassroots groups first, and you can always bring in the pros first, the housing authorities and the housing. It's their job to come. They're going to show up. Get the people, get the community people first. But what I want to say, if I may, about the inclusionary zoning, there is a lot to learn, and I want to salute your effort, your wish to know more, so I want to tell you some references. If you go in with search items like exclusionary zoning, inclusionary zoning, mixed income housing, and infill development, go to sources you can find online. Like the first is a group that wrote textbooks these guys studied for their masters in planning, Urban Land Institute. And then there's National Low Income Housing Coalition. And there's a group I'm a member of as a board member of the Housing Authority, National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. Should I repeat that stuff?
That last one,
That
yes.
last one for sure.
National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, NARO. And all over the nation, people in housing authorities
There's also,
interact with them.
Ground Solutions Network.
I've heard of them, but I haven't gone to them, but I'll take your
Yeah,
recommendation.
they have a good IZ page
Yeah.
with with a lot of the.
The Urban Land Institute in particular, their stuff is great with footnotes and glossaries. They lay it out very well. I enjoyed them in planning school compared to some others.
Can I ask you a
But-
question?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the one question that keeps all evening, all repeatedly, is there anyone at UF, is there a professor at UF who has expertise both in this field and lives in Gainesville and understands?
I don't know who's there after Kim Tanzer's retirement. I haven't kept up with who's over there like I did back in the day when I was involved in the Depot Park and Brad Guy and all those guys, so I don't know. I'm sure there is, and Kim could tell you. I don't know. Maybe he could tell you.
Maybe somebody in urban.
But I also want to say that
They've got a really strong urban planning department, right?
We do. I don't know. I mean, Juan may actually know because he's on one of the committees. I don't know off the top of my head if there's anybody who's really on faculty that's.
But the
that's doing a
classroom
lot
is
of
so
housing.
different from the field of practice because
Right.
then you mix in politics.
Right.
Or politricks, as I
I'm
like
gonna
to say.
try to
And,
find that.
but the difference of inclusionary and mandatory and voluntary, it's been at least, or it's been at least 2 decades because it was before there was a written manual on it. These guys, or you were the only one there, many ways back, but housing division at the city and growth management at the county tried to offer incentives for affordable housing. They've been doing it for decades, but it mostly sat in a drawer and hardly anybody pushed it at growth management, and one knucklehead pushed it a few years back at the city side, and they got practically zilch. But what they did get, look where they are, Lewis Place and Tiger Bay. The worst possible places to put those, but because of federal money, that's what GHA is branching out with private development, because they have to move away from pockets, from siloed HUD funding. And the federal government is cutting us back every year, a lesser percentage. So housing authorities have to partner with the private sector. But what we find is NIMBY is everywhere. So pilot in lieu of taxes gets you a big pile of money and fighting to try to find some place to put it because nobody will have it. That's the reason to have mixed income housing and dispersed everywhere. And it could be the same lots that could be affected by this thing of getting rid of single family zoning, could be the lots that should be, could be affordable housing. They are competitors as far as what's going to actually come out of the ground. And it's going to take public policy to keep it from being the second tier of national developers who are waiting to pounce on that hot button of luxury student housing, come into these single-family neighborhoods and put in, not the giant blocks, but 4-story buildings. Any infill lots they find, they will send fat offers to every adjoining lot, every adjoining owner until they have enough lot to put up a 4-story building with 4-story apartments and 4 bathrooms and $4,000 a month. Not affordable housing, not family housing, absolutely student housing, and you get to figure out where those extra 16 cars per building go on your block. So that's why it's got to be mandatory. And the materials you're going to check, you're also going to find out that 10% is a tiny dip, and that 80% is just hitting the tip of the iceberg of people who are stressed. It needs to be 50% AMI, it needs to be 20% inclusionary. You don't change them. You're really slow turning at 10%. It takes 20% to be transformative. So I wish I could have time to really tell you all stuff. But that's why these meetings have to really be exchanged, you know, not just a information fair or charts and here's the charts that explain what we're doing while the people sit and munch snacks. They need to get to talk. And those groups I referred you to, they definitely will talk.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I like the idea of 20%.
I do too. I like
Yeah,
that.
thank-
I like the word transform.
Yes.
Any other public comment? All right,
See, I
member
want
comment?
you again.
I'm sorry? Member comment? This open time to share.
What were you doing before that?
This is where you can talk about things that are not related to whatever.
Oh, okay, I'm hungry.
Okay. So our next meeting date is,
13.
I think we've already kind of discussed everything
I think-
that we had to discuss. I think we're good.
I have to. keep
I
you
appreciate you caring though. Thank you.
So December 13th, do we know where we'll be at?
I'm gonna write it in my calendar.
I'll let you know for sure, but I'm leaving, unless y'all have a preference and you want to do it like you did this one. Otherwise, I'm thinking since that's going to be mostly organizational, that can be at the Thomas Center.
I think that's fine, yeah.
Okay. All right. Then I declare this meeting adjourned.